Welcome to Frisco, The Secret History. I'm your host, Knox Bronson. I have a great episode for you today, Part 3 and the finale of the Nick DeJohn murder story. I covered Nick's 1947 garroting in a North Beach apartment building in Episode 30, the investigation and the surprise witness at the trial in Episode 32. You should listen to those episodes if you haven't already. Today I'm going to discuss the end of the trial, the final twists and turns in this very odd case, and the outcome of which I am at a loss to explain. Before we get going, I want to say thank you to Walter Haas at Grafeo Coffee Roasters at 735 Columbus Avenue in San Francisco. I should mention that Grafeo Coffee is just up the street on Columbus Avenue from La Rocca's Corner, a location central to this story. Grafeo was founded in 1935 and has been selling coffee beans to the public and the best restaurants around town ever since. I've been drinking Grafeo coffee since I lived around the corner on Mason Street back in the 70s. I used a mocha stovetop espresso pot back then and have a French press today. Either way, it's the richest and smoothest coffee I've ever tasted. Grafeo offers a dark roast, a light roast, and a Swiss water decaf bean. If you can't get to North Beach, you can go to grafeo.com. That is graffeo.com and order there. They sell whole beans or will grind to your request. I love starting my day with a huge mug of dark roast. I have been recommending and gifting Grafeo beans to my friends forever. And I'm really happy to say that Grafeo Coffee is a founding sponsor for the Frisco The Secret History podcast. I am so happy to be associated with such an historic and iconic San Francisco brand. Grafeo beans are, as it says on the package, simply the finest coffee in the world. It's true. Give Grafeo a try. You will thank me. We left off in Episode 32 with the strange and senseless hour-and-a-half kidnapping of Catherine Reardon, daughter of ex-San Francisco Police Chief Michael Reardon, and currently a State of California Assistant Attorney General. At the time of the kidnapping, he was out of town in Chicago. She was a secretary at the law offices of William Ferreter and James Purcell. Ferreter was representing Sebastiano Nani and Michael Abati. Purcell was representing Leonard Calamia in the Nick DeJohn murder trial. Catherine had driven her sister home from a dinner party in their father's car, dropped her off, and was returning to the party when three men hopped into the car when she came to a stop at an intersection. They held her captive for an hour and a half, grilling her about her father's trip to Chicago and her employers. She had no useful information, and they finally let her go. As they exited her car, one of them said, "What do you think Lima will think about this?" She made her way to her boss's home, that of attorney Jim Purcell. Meanwhile, back at the dinner party, her date for the evening, 23-year-old Kenneth Thompson, had no idea any of this was happening. When Catherine didn't come back, he went looking for her, called Park Emergency Hospital, called the police station, and finally learned around midnight that she'd turned up at Jim Purcell's house. He drove over and brought her home, where her family doctor treated her for shock and some light bruising on her head. When police first questioned Thompson, he told them he'd been with Catherine the whole night until 3 a.m, a story that didn't hold up, and got him hauled down to the Hall of Justice for a second round of questioning. That's when he admitted the truth. He, Purcell, and Catherine had agreed to keep quiet about the whole thing until her father got back into town. Her father returned to San Francisco the next day. After talking to his daughter and the police, he said, "I certainly believe my daughter's story. This whole thing is incomprehensible to me. I have talked with Captain English, who has made an independent investigation of this whole situation and can't find any rational motive for what happened. I've been a police officer for 30 years and certainly know the police or the district attorney's office would never condone such tactics. Neither the defense nor the prosecution could have had any possible motive in this. The whole thing is incomprehensible. This is true. In hindsight, it makes no sense at all. The fact is that it happened, and here's what I find truly incomprehensible. The police, the prosecution, the defense attorneys all agreed to write off Catherine Reardon's hour-and-a-half kidnapping ordeal as nothing more than a prank by persons unknown for motives unknown, and promptly forgot about it. It had absolutely no effect on the ongoing trial, but it foreshadowed in a most peculiar way this story's startling denouement. Her kidnapping took place on the weekend before the prosecution presented its final evidence in the murder trial. Her kidnapping took place on the weekend before the prosecution presented its final evidence in the murder trial, wherein Inspector Frank Ahern testified that Leonard Calamia had confessed to taking Nick DeJohn to La Rocca's corner the night of his murder and was trying to rat out the rest of the gang, claiming, "I couldn't have done it myself. I needed help. I needed help." San Francisco Homicide Inspector Frank J. Ahern sat in the witness box with a military bearing as he described Leonard Calamia as a squealer who tried to rat out his fellow defendants in the murder trial of Nick DeJohn. As the Examiner reported on February 18, 1949, the weakling Calamia, an ex-dope peddler, was kind of a menial and hanger-on in the gang of racketeers which, the state claims, garroted ex-Chicagoan DeJohn because he was muscling in. It was Calamia's role in the murder, the state asserts, to deliver DeJohn into the hands of the others. Inspector Ahern said that when Calamia was first questioned in the case, he denied having seen DeJohn on the murder day and denied that the slain man's son, John DeJohn, lived in the Calamia home. It was Calamia, said Ahern, who led police to the North Beach basement where DeJohn was garroted. And it was Calamia, he went on, who furnished police with the names of the 4 men who had disappeared into the basement with DeJohn on the night of May 7, 1947. Initially, after his arrest, Calamia had denied everything. He denied seeing Nick DeJohn on the day DeJohn was murdered. He denied that Nick DeJohn's son lived as a guest in his home. Confronted by proof that he lied, Calamia changed his story repeatedly and little by little began to break, said Ahern. Finally, said the inspector, on the night of May 22, 1947, Calamia sent word from city prison that he wanted to see Ahern. Ahern took him to the office of Chief Prosecutor Thomas Lynch. There, said Ahern, Calamia admitted that he had spent almost all of the fatal day with DeJohn and had led him by pretext that night to La Rocca's corner, a Columbus Avenue bar. Question: did he tell you who else was there? He did. Who? Tony Lima was there, and Sebastiano Nani, also known as Bastiano and Benny Nani. Mike Abadi was there. Frank Scapatura was in there. Also a man Calamia knew as Sam. He did not recall the last name. Also another Leonard whose name he did not know. Also a man they called the shoemaker, and a Pasquale Siracusa he knew as Patsy. Did he indicate where these persons were in the bar? Yes, sir. Mr. Calamia at the time asked for a piece of paper and drew a diagram. Lynch produced a crude diagram of the interior of the bar, showing the positions of all the defendants and DeJohn in the bar. It was admitted to evidence and shown to the jury over the violent objections of the defense. The diagram showed Alphonse and Leo La Rocca, brothers and proprietors of the place behind the bar. The pair and their father, Vincenzo Papa La Rocca, have from the beginning of the case done nothing but shrug their shoulders at police questions, said the chief of inspectors. Judge Devine ruled that Calamia's confession admissible, but only against Calamia. He instructed the jury quite carefully that Calamia's admissions, including his own 2 maps placing Nani and a body near the murder scene, could not be considered as evidence against them, that they were evidence only against Calamia. Nonetheless, defense attorney Ferreter said somewhat bitterly, "No jury can unring a bell or unscramble eggs," about the judge's admonitions. The headline on the Examiner's front page for February 20th read, DeJohn trial delayed, Nani supported by wife. It featured an interview with Sebastiano Nani's dark-eyed Sicilian wife, Teresa, which had been arranged by Nani's attorney, William Ferreter. "My husband Sebastiani," she began nervously, "is a good family man, a good father. I know he's innocent in the charge against him in the DeJohn murder. Each night I pray he will be freed. The children, Agnes 15, Peter 14, and Emily 12, nodded in agreement. And then Mrs. Nani burst into tears and could say no more." On the mantel, prominently displayed, sat a new 6-volume set of murder mysteries by S.S. Van Dien, creator of Philo Vance, the most fashionable and popular detective in America at the time. Philo Vance, the fictional dandy of great erudition and culture, detested stupidity more than he detested bad taste, and often quoted the French statesman Fouché. "C'est plus qu'un crime, c'est une faute." It is more than a crime, it is a mistake. I want to take a break from the trial for a moment. While it was front page news at the Examiner, the front page of the San Francisco Chronicle told a different story. Remember that the newspapers of the day were cable television, Google, YouTube, and Facebook, and all other social media combined. There was no television, and radio was a completely different animal back then. On March 2nd, the banner headline at the top of the Chronicle's front page read "The Greatest Story Ever Told," with an introduction by the author, Fulton Oursler, about how he had come to write the series that was premiering in the paper this very day. Right under that story, on the left side of the 8-column page, was the headline, Chapter 1, The Man Who Waited. A carpenter, Joseph of Nazareth, speaks about the girl, Mary. The story read, "People in Nazareth said that Joseph was like a great ancestor and a favorite son of Jacob. It was true the carpenter with his small golden beard, so different from his black-haired neighbors, was a dreamy, quiet-spoken man looking more like a scholar than a craftsman. With his great knotty hands, Joseph could build a house or a fence, fashion a chair or a bench, hang a door, bend a wheel, build a new plow or yoke. But Joseph, with his prematurely bald head, was called visionary because he refrained from gambling with travelers of passing caravans. He avoided tavern women and found his pleasure in good talk with a few neighbors. Among Nazarenes, these were queer habits, for generally they were a rowdy lot. What followed was a kind of fairy tale about Joseph before he met Mary, although 2 paragraphs caught my eye. The danger was real. Roman spies were everywhere. One learned not to speak ideas aloud. In the last century, there had been a series of hapless rebellions in the land. Some of the best of the young men in the province, healthy and strong ones, enthusiastic ones, had perished in those feeble and foredoomed revolts. Thousands of patriots dying for Israel during the 100 years the Romans had held Israel. Samuel could tell Joseph conditions were getting much worse. Rich and powerful men of their own nation were collaborating with the invaders, fattening their fortunes by betraying their own people. How long must they endure slavery with treason thrown in? Did Joseph realize that in every village young men were once more plotting to throw the Romans out and make the people free? Why would Joseph not join? I'll tell you this, since I've been doing the serious research for this podcast, going back to the early and mid-20th century, I've found one constant story: the rich screwing the poor, over and over and over again. On a related note, to the right of that story was the huge headline: Pyramid Clubbers Plan a Legal Fight, Meeting Broken Up. The story was about pyramid clubs that were all the rage and getting raided by the police, and how they were demanding a trial by jury and were planning on hiring Jake the Master Ehrlich to defend them. The story read, Pyramid Clubbers came out fighting yesterday. By the hundreds, they formed themselves into a defense committee of the whole, retained counsel, and prepared to battle through every court in the land in defense of what they consider their inalienable right to run $1 into 2,000. Last night, however, they ran into trouble in Broadmoor, an unincorporated area near Colma. The development's police chief, James Thomas, broke up a meeting of some 300 clubbers in the community center there. I will be doing a full episode about that in the future. Same principle, those schemes. The few screw the many, like the AI bubble or Bitcoin or all of Elon Musk's shell games. I'm sorry, I couldn't help myself. I do prefer 1949 to 2026 sometimes. Elsewhere on the Chronicle front page were stories about communism, General MacArthur, a trial in Budapest, a filibuster in the U.S. Senate waged by Southerners, and Joe Louis resigning as the world heavyweight boxing champion, a title he had held for 12 years, so that Ezzard Charles and Jersey Joe Walcott could hold a match to decide the new champion. A lot going on, as there always is on planet Earth. On March 1st, the defense began calling witnesses to the stand. The first one called was Leonard Calamia's wife, Catherine, who testified that her husband had been home by 10 p.m. on the night in question. The murder time had been placed at 10:30 p.m. by the prosecution in earlier testimony. She remembered that she and DeJohn's son, John, who lived with them, and her husband were having coffee and donuts at the time of the murder. She said of her husband, he always comes home by 10. Young DeJohn had testified to the grand jury that Calamia did not get home until after midnight that night, and that the coffee and donuts night had been May 9th, the night his father's body was found out in the marina. On cross-examination, District Attorney Lynch had been able to rattle Catherine Calamia, discrediting much of her testimony to the chagrin of the defense. Lynch asked, "Isn't it a fact that it was May 9 you had coffee and donuts?" "No, it was May 7. "Were you there when Calamia told Johnny about his father's death?" "Yes." "When was that?" "May 7. "May 7? "I mean May 8. "No, I mean May 9. "Wasn't it a fact that it was May 9 that Johnny was listening to a news broadcast and asked, 'Is that my father they are talking about?' And Calamia turned off the radio?" "Yes." "Prior to the time you heard about it on the radio, hadn't Calamia mentioned to you that DeJohn had been killed?" "No." "Didn't Calamia turn off the radio?" "No, the baby turned it off. She played with the radio." "Did Calamia say anything to you that night about the death of DeJohn?" "No." "When did you first know about it?" "The next day when Mrs. DeJohn came to town." Leonard Calamia was never called to testify in his own defense. On the stand, defendant Micah Body gave out a succession of no answers to nearly all questions. Had he seen the basement apartment? No. Had he ever been in the basement apartment? No. Had he ever known defendant Nani? No. Also said of Body, he had never seen Anita Rocia Venza before she had appeared in court. You will remember she had testified she overheard the murder plot by Scapatura, Lima, Abati, and Nani the day before the murder and was run out of town. On the stand later, Vincenzo Papa La Rocca denied this. He says Mrs. Venza never stepped foot in his basement apartment. Abati admitted a financial connection between the Sunland Sales Company and the La Roccas, admitting that they had received a loan of $18,000, about $735,000 today, from Papa La Rocca, which had been repaid. Abati said on May 6 and May 7th of 1947, he was working as a bartender at the Tropical Grill on Drum and Oregon Streets from 8 in the morning until 9 at night. Co-defendant Sebastiano Nani said he was at home taking care of his sick wife. He said he didn't know Nick DeJohn, he didn't know Tony Lima, and he didn't know Frank Scapatura. His 15-year-old daughter, Agnes, corroborated her father's claim of being at home on the fateful night. On May 10, the day after DeJohn's body was found, Nani went to Los Angeles to buy a load of bananas, he said. He said that he didn't stay in a hotel, had driven his own car, and had traveled with Ciro Gallo, a Sunnyvale fish peddler. How did it happen then, Lynch wanted to know, that Ciro Gallo and a Sebastiano Nani were registered at the Biltmore Hotel in Los Angeles, 49 minutes after midnight on May 10. He produced the hotel's register as proof. Nani acknowledged his signature and simply couldn't remember, he said. I cannot determine the fate of the bananas. At the end of the day's testimony, the jury, at the request of the prosecution and the consent of the defense, toured La Rocca's corner and the apartment building at Lombard and Taylor, where Nick DeJohn had been murdered. The defendants were not included in the field trip. With Judge Devine acting as tour guide, they inspected the dingy basement apartment where the garroting had taken place, along with the second-story apartment where surprise witness Eleanor Pierce had seen so much activity the night of the murder. When the judge and the jury entered La Rocca's corner, Leo La Rocca was behind the bar. He said, "Have a drink, Judge?" The judge declined. The next day, March 2nd, after 4 weeks of testimony, both the defense and the prosecution rested their cases. Final arguments followed, and the jury began deliberating the case on Monday, March 7th. The jury deliberated all day on the 7th. The first jury ballot on Monday was 6 not guilty, 4 for conviction. 2 jurors passed on voting. At 4:10 p.m., the jury sent out a request to have 2 transcripts read back: Inspector Ahern's testimony concerning Calamia and Catherine Calamia's testimony about when her husband came home on the night of May 7. After that, the jury broke for dinner at 6:15, returned at 8:30 p.m. when Catherine Calamia's testimony was read back. That took an hour and a half, and then deliberations resumed. At 11:40 p.m., the jury recessed and was sequestered at the Fairmont Hotel on top of Nob Hill. They returned to court in the morning. At noon on Tuesday, another ballot, 8-4 for acquittal. At that point, the jury requested Venza's testimony be read back, particularly the passage about the mysterious figure she called Papa La Rocca's father-in-law, who admitted her to the basement the day before DeJohn was killed. The defense had proved at trial that La Rocca's actual father-in-law had been dead for 3 weeks on the date in question. The prosecution contended the figure was an in-law named Salvatore Taormina, who never appeared at trial. On the third ballot, it was 7-5 for acquittal. The jury had been out for 30 hours at this point. At 5:30 that day, San Francisco DA Pat Brown walked into the judge's chambers and, to the surprise of everyone, asked the judge to dismiss the jury, claiming he did not trust his star witness, Anita Venza, wife of a crab fisherman, petty criminal, described in the newspaper as a dumpy little woman with an unsavory past. The judge dismissed the jury at 6:10 p.m. A police official who would not be named said, "Never in 20 years of experience have I seen a jury discharged while it was still waiting for a transcript to be read. This case stinks from the district attorney's end to the beginning. It is customary to ask police to sit in on all cases of this kind when about to discharge a jury. The police were not asked to sit in, and the door was literally slammed in their faces as they stood outside." The district attorney was not available for comment. Assistant DA Lynch refused to comment when questioned by the press. As they left the trial chambers, some jurors shared their thoughts. Juror Miriam Ford, an accountant who favored acquittal, said, "I wouldn't accept Mrs. Venza's testimony, and the state didn't have anything else to offer except Mrs. Pierce. I believed Mrs. Pierce, but there were too many loose ends. Mrs. Venza was so agile in telling her lies that I couldn't tell when she was telling the truth." Juror Leona Cantrell, who favored conviction, "It's my personal opinion that every juror in there thought they were guilty, but some felt that legal proof of guilt was lacking, and some were a bit afraid to vote guilty. I don't know why." Juror William Viveros, who favored acquittal, said, "Nobody was afraid to vote guilty. We just weren't convinced of their guilt." He added that after rereading Venza's testimony, 3 more jurors were persuaded to favor acquittal after the last formal ballot. Chief of Detectives James English said, "I'm convinced of the guilt of the three and have an honest difference of opinion as to the future policy on the case." Mrs. Venza may have been mistaken on some facts, but she was not lying. All I can see is that she may have been mistaken as to time and place on secondary matters. Assistant DA Lynch said that, on reading Venza's testimony back to the jury, all the little embroideries began popping out. However, I'm still convinced we had the right people. Calamia, Nani, and a body were released. They exited the city jail smiling. Tony Lima and Frank Scapatura were still missing. Free of the murder conspiracy charges, they were still being sought on federal charges for flight from prosecution. They would one day return to Frisco where they belonged. Tony did a little time for the federal beef and then resumed his role as boss of Little Italy. Frank Scapatura, unbelievably, died in his car of a heart attack while driving past La Rocca's corner one sunny afternoon. Nick DeJohn was the fourth man murdered in San Francisco who had been involved with Chicago's Sunland Sales Cheese and Oil Company, known as the Cheese Syndicate Mob, before heading out west. There were 5 other former Cheese Syndicate associates already in graves back in Chicago. That makes 9 dead men. A federal narcotics officer said at the time, "That's the way the mafia kills. These people never stop murdering while an enemy lives." I keep wondering, where was Bone Remmer in all of this? Nick DeJohn and the rest were North Beach with Chicago connections. Bone's turf was the Tenderloin, and he was the liaison to Las Vegas and Lucky Luciano for boss Tony Lima. I wonder what it was like for John DeJohn when he figured out that the man in whose house he was living had been part of the conspiracy to kill his father. In 1959, he was co-managing a welterweight boxer named Carmen Basilio in New York City, so he was still in the family business. The San Francisco police had hoped the conviction of Nick DeJohn's murderers would send a message back east that San Francisco would not tolerate a mobster invasion. Like Freddie Francisco had said, a new kind of gangster in town. Instead, they walked. "75 years later, it seems like D.A. Pat Brown threw the match on purpose, but I can find nothing to corroborate that or suggest any kind of ulterior motive, payoff, or clandestine connection. Nothing. It's as mysterious and as nonsensical as the kidnapping of Catherine Reardon. If I had a co-writer for this podcast, he or she might just say, 'Relax, Knox. It's just Frisco.'" Frisco, The Secret History, is a listener-supported podcast. Main episodes will always be free. Our website is www.friscothesecrethistory.com. Visit the website for transcripts and show notes. Paid tier members, starting at as little as $5 a month, will receive bonus episodes and other perks of membership. There is a $1 tier, but that will simply give you ad-free episodes when I get some advertisers. If you enjoy the podcast, please tell your friends about it, especially those who enjoy San Francisco or true crime history. Word of mouth is the absolute best means of promotion for any creative endeavor in this world of algorithms and the ceaseless barrage of ads, notifications, and appeals on every digital platform. If you are aware of some particular aspect of San Francisco history in the 30s and 40s you would like me to research or have a story to tell, please let me know. Once again, I'm your host, Knox Bronson. Thank you for listening. Until next time, please get a little crazy and call it Frisco.